Next on the agenda is for public hearing is the ordinance to amend and reordain Section 172-2 of the Warren County Code, designated private roads in the Linden Heights subdivision as highways for law enforcement purposes. Caitlin Jordan, please.
When the Board of Supervisors in 1980 enacted Warren County Code Section 172-2, it designated all platted roads and streets in Shenandoah Farm subdivision as highways for law enforcement purposes. However, since that time, there have been properties that have split away from Shenandoah Farms, namely properties that are found on Warren County Tax Map 23C. Currently, our code section describes Shenandoah Farm subdivision as various tax maps, including Tax Map 23C. But in light of the changes of the split between the creation of the Linden Heights subdivision, the request before the board tonight is that the ordinance be amended to reflect these changes, that the language describing Shenandoah Farm subdivision be changed to reflect the parts of Tax Map 23C that's of the properties that still remain in Shenandoah Farms, and that Linden Heights be added specifically to the ordinance and to designate the streets found in that subdivision. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So, as we understand it, Linden Heights has separated from Shenandoah Farms, and they're a separate entity completely. Is that what?
Yes. In 1992, there was an agreement signed between the Linden Heights Homeowners Association and the property owners of Shenandoah Farms, completely removing those properties found on sheets 2 and 4 of Tax Map 23C, and it is its own subdivision and completely separate from Shenandoah Farms. So the ordinance should reflect that.
Okay. That's all I have, Chairman.
Now, does this simply means that the sheriff's department can actually go on their streets without any problem? Am I reading that right?
It will clarify enforcement for the residents of Linden Heights, as well as Shenandoah Farms, as well as for law enforcement.
Okay, that's all I have.
So if someone in Linden Heights calls because of a speeder or anything like that, at this point, without this, law enforcement can't go and address that issue. With the ordinance, they can?
It's not that law enforcement can't go to enforce that issue. The problem is when you actually try to enforce it in court. Because as of right now, it's unclear, because all of the properties on Tax Map 23C are labeled in the ordinance as Shenandoah Farm subdivision. It needs to be clarified that Linden Heights is also included. Currently, they are included, but the ordinance is not clear in that because of the changes that have happened since 1980.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. This public hearing is now open. Mrs. Shiraki, has anyone signed up?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Joe Andrews.
Yes.
Me again, Walt. Joe Andrews, 735 McGill Farm Lane. I think this is clearly government overreach. I've spoke to a couple people that live in this subdivision. They're not fans of this. What this basically says is that law enforcement can come there and patrol without being called. That was your question. Law enforcement can go anywhere as long as they've got a phone call. So if a neighbor doesn't like what you're doing or thinks that you're breaking the law enforcement can still go to this area. What this is changing is that now law enforcement can go there without being called. And I don't think anyone wants that.
Is that accurate? I mean, not doubting you, but to get the lawyer here.
See my shirt?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, sorry, thank you. I would disagree that it's saying law enforcement can, with this ordinance, law enforcement can just now go in and patrol. What this says is that law enforcement can treat if, let's say if somebody is speeding down the road, law enforcement can enforce the speed limit in these roads. It's not an open ticket to where now law enforcement can now come into and patrol. I would have to ask law enforcement what their protocols are, but I believe there's a big distinction to be made, that this is simply saying that law enforcement can enforce, can treat the roads within Linden Heights as highways for the purposes of law enforcement.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Yes, Miss Jeannie Anderson is signed up.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for letting me speak earlier today, so I don't have to stay here all night. Yes, I didn't understand what was taking place tonight, so I came, I cut my survey of the neighborhood short, because I was like, this isn't feasible for me, I have small children. But I spoke to a few people about this in particular, and I think first off, I want to say that I want to question the nature of this request. It is not outlined in the application papers, which I find out of the ordinary because usually the Planning Commission and so forth is very thorough in identifying why they're bringing up changes to the community. And so the questions that I have are, what benefit does it provide to the community, which you addressed some of those things. And I want to know, why is it being brought up tonight? What are some of the examples of what it would look like? What are the negative impacts? So you have no one to provide any negative impacts of that sort of thing. I think Joe Andrews kind of touched on it, just saying there's government overreach. You said that it's not clear because of the changes that took place. Those changes took place because the residents did not want to be part of Shenandoah Farms, and there's a very big divide as to why they did not want to be part of Shenandoah Farms. There's a dispute on Old Linden Road as to where that divide should be or why it should be there in the first place. And I think that, there's definitely an issue with speeding, especially on Old Linden Road. It seems that Shenandoah Farms residents are coming and cutting across, or even people that don't live anywhere nearby, are cutting across from Tomahawk area, which is Shenandoah Farms, through Old Linden to High Top. And that disturbs the residents there. Some of them have small children. It's dangerous. I think there was a high-speed chase through there at one point. But overall, and then I also spoke with a law enforcement resident there. We actually have several law enforcement who reside in our neighborhood. And this one particular gentleman, I asked to come to speak tonight, but most people don't, unfortunately, want to come and speak because they feel like what they say doesn't matter, and you guys are going to do whatever it is that you're going to do because that's what's in the plan and that's what you've been counting on for 40 years. But he said that it may also have to do with the Rural Addition program itself, that you can't give over give a road over to the state, maybe if it's not in designated for law enforcement purposes. That might be a stipulation in the project. I don't know. I saw Sheriff Mark Butler walking around here. Maybe he could come and speak. It would be, since it's regarding law enforcement, I think that, we should have some input from him. And I was unable to get anyone else from my neighborhood to come to speak that I know of. And I actually didn't know about this when I started surveying my neighborhood. I began surveying my neighborhood because I had heard that, some attorneys were involved and they were gonna come and ban guns, and I saw that Dungleden was being added, and I thought, well, why don't you guys just take care of the whole problem and put it in like a noise ordinance or something countywide, instead of taking the freedoms away from others who, maybe have a very stressful workload, and that's how they like to relieve their stress, is just some target practice at the end of the day on their day off. There's nothing wrong with it. So thank you. I don't know what else to say, and I'm sorry if I was kind of loud earlier. I'm not very good at this. I'm very new to it, and I appreciate your humility.
We're in the same boat.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And please, I don't want anyone to think that we don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm more than willing to hear what anyone has to say. We may not agree, but I'm going to listen to what you have to say.
I think there is also some issues coming here too, because if you don't bring it through the county, through the correct channels, then maybe people get in trouble or something, and I don't know all about that, but, I don't know. And I don't think other people know. They're just here to say, like Mr. Gabbert said, well, why is there $100,000 there? Well, maybe someone could explain it to him. I don't know.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? You're more than welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Nancy Nguyen. I'm at 146 Lookout Point Way, Linden, Virginia. And I wasn't actually going to speak on this topic, but this whole state road police thing, listen, I live in Shenandoah Farms. You call law enforcement and they don't show up. And they can come anytime they want. So we never see law enforcement. Even the law enforcement that live in our community, when they see an ATV and they know what's wrong, they don't stop it. So I don't think having law enforcement have permission is going to change anything for Linden Heights, in my opinion. And the second thing is on the old Linden Road. I do take that road quite a bit instead of going Tomahawk, just for different and change. I usually do the speed limit. I do about 20. I don't think if people speed on that road, they shouldn't, and people speed all over. Our community's grown. I don't know how to rectify that for them. We just can't, we're a mountain community. Because when I first moved here, somebody tried to block, they put a big trench in Tomahawk. I think some of you might remember that. So we couldn't use the road. And I feel for people that live on Old Linden or any road where people speed and are disrespectful. They shouldn't do that. And the other issue is about shooting. Like, people want to relieve their tension. I'm not going to be very popular with people with this one, because your bullets have to go somewhere. And there's people that shoot in Linden Heights that shoot within a mile of my home. Now, and they shoot into a refuge area. Do they have permission to shoot there? The bullets have to go somewhere, and if they don't have a proper backdrop and it's not safe, you just can't recreational shoot. So I'm going to support, if you have less than 5 acres, it's not safe. And what gives anybody permission or the right to think that because they're having a stressful day, that they can get their little weapons out and just shoot, and that's going to be okay? What if somebody was walking in that refuge area? You have to think about those things. So that's all I wanted to say on that. I think there has to be some sensibility about people's, yes, I support the Second Amendment. I do, but I think people need to be wise where they shoot and in what type of neighborhoods that it's okay for them to shoot in.
Jeannie, would you come up and if you want to say some more, so everybody can hear you?
I didn't want to answer negatively towards her or anything, because I know that you said that in the beginning. I just want to say also that people who are trained in weapons know how to stop their, ammo or whatever, and they, aren't necessarily shooting into the preserve. The preserve would just be like, additional room in case something were to happen. It just adds that extra layer, but they would have, berms shooting down into the ground, that sort of thing. And that's not anybody's business, unless something happens. But nothing's happened, for one. And also, there are things that you can do that I think have been brought up in the past that have to do with like education. And I don't mean, because I know that's kind of silly, people say, oh, well, you teach gun training or whatever in, like out in the classroom or something with an NRA instructor. Some people say, well, that's just bizarre. Well, you can actually teach people about weapons safety in the classroom in a school setting. But we're not debating the gun ban issue right now. I brought it up because it seemed like there was an issue that was coming on board, and it's going on around the country and everything like that. And it has to do with law enforcement. If this guy's shooting and they call, and then it gives law enforcement, I mean, if they call, law enforcement can go check it out anyway, which the residents have some experience in that. And they say, well, I'm not recklessly shooting, which is already a law, that if you're found recklessly shooting a firearm, you can be criminally charged or whatever with that. So that's already a law. You're not allowed to do that. And they can come to your property and charge you with that if they find that's what you're doing. And like, it's established, they can call and they can come and check it out. But the cop, if the highways, I don't know if the highway's designated, if then the cop can sit on the corner and wait for you to start shooting because it's your day off or something, and then come and bother you. And so I think that might be a concern too among residents. And they just don't want anything to change. They really like it there, and they like where they live, and they don't see any problems. It just has to do with the road maintenance. There was embezzlements prior to the sanitary district agreement. And then there were expense issues because it's very expensive for an outside contractor to come up there and maintain, and the county offered to keep those funds. So,
Yep,
sorry.
thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? One at a time. And could we get your name and address, please?
Noelle Williams, 419 Chrysler Road, Front Royal, Virginia. Let's just be adults here. Don't speed, don't shoot, and we'll be fine. Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Please, come up. Your name and address, please.
Yeah, good evening. That's Kevin Schmidt, 1270 High Top Road. I had no intentions of speaking tonight. I'm here in support of some neighbors for some further issues down the line. But I just wanted to ask a question about the amendment. Is this amendment, it's tax code area 23C, directly for the property owners in Linden Heights, right? So that there's no affecting the sanitary districts in Shenandoah Farms or any other property owners?
Not that I'm aware of, Caitlin?
The only amendments proposed tonight are clarifying the properties on tax map 23 for Shenandoah Farm subdivision and Linden Heights. That is it.
So my suggestion would be constituents expect individual solutions for individual problems and complex solutions for complex problems. And we're talking about an amendment that affects two different sanitary districts and property owner groups, homeowner sects. So I think the amendment should come from one or the other. Shenandoah Farms should write specifically, not via their tax code, for their streets, whether or not they want to have, with all due respect, I love our folks at law enforcement. I think they do a great job here. But what we're talking about is speed traps. And so people in that community need to decide whether or not they want to be coming home from work and they want to see a cop waiting on the corner, you know, ready to issue a ticket. You know, if that's what you want in your community, that's fine. I'm not going to say how I feel either way. But again, individual solutions for individual problems and complex solutions for complex problems. All right? That's it.
Caitlin, we're still talking about Linden Heights, correct?
Yes.
I mean, we've went way around in a circle and we're going to stop this.
Yes, this is only to clarify Linden Heights. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? If there is no one else that would like to speak, we consider this public hearing now closed. What is the pleasure of the board?
I have a question, if you will, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
sir.
The sheriffs and deputies, they're there to enforce only state and county law. Is that right? They typically don't enforce any individual homeowners associations laws.
Correct. I believe it would only be state and county ordinances and statutes.
That's what I understood.
What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors amend and reordain Section 172-2 of the Warren County Code to designate the private roads and private streets located in Linden Heights subdivision as highways for law enforcement purposes.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
I'm kind of at an impasse here of, I'd almost like to have time to have more discussion and have a more clear, I don't think everybody is clear here on that this is, how much power this gives the sheriff's department versus this gives them the ability, not necessarily to go there, but to, when they go there and there's a problem, that it stands up in the court versus not, they can't issue a ticket or anything if they don't have this. And maybe I'm off, and that's why I'd almost rather postpone the action until I have a more clear understanding so that I know I'm doing the best things for all parties.
So if I can, and certainly we can, postpone this to another meeting. I'll give you one real-world example, drunk driving. So if you're drunk driving in your driveway, well, that's not a crime. If you're drunk driving on a private street, also not a crime. If you're drunk driving on a highway in the Commonwealth, then that's a crime. So that's one thing that does. And, I'm not a criminal defense attorney or a prosecutor, but that's one real-world example of what this would do.
And that's what my question was. It's not necessarily giving them any more permission to go in there. It's just giving them the ability.
It's making some criminal laws applicable to these streets the same way they would be to, North Commerce Avenue. And again, Mr. Daly wanted to chime in with a little bit of what I knew, but certainly if you have other questions about it, it's fine to defer it to another day.
Mr. Fox, would you like to withdraw your recommendation?
I withdraw, and then I'd like to table it.
Would you like to table this until a later date?
Yes.
September 15th-ish, somewhere in there?
So would you like to table this to a work session discussion?
Yes,
Or just table?
please.
Okay, so would you like the September 1st work session after the regular meeting or the September 8th work session at 7 o'clock?
September 8th.
Okay.
And could I ask if there's any interested parties to attend to the work session, would that be permissible?
There you go.
Okay, very well.
I'll
So-
second that then.
Okay, very well.
Could I get a roll call, please?
Thank you.
Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Cullors?
Aye.
Mr. Mabe?
Aye.